Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. Have you ever stumbled into the wrong place, only to find exactly what your heart needed? Tonight's story begins with rain, heartbreak, and a hotel room opened by mistake. But what follows just might restore your faith in fate. Spring rain in Paris wasn't poetic tonight. It poured over cobbled streets with cold persistence, as if trying to wash every trace of emotion from the city. Elise Laurent, 26, shivered as she stepped into the grand lobby of Maison Moreau, one of the capital's most prestigious hotels. Her simple black dress clung to her body, soaked through from the rain. Her long, dark brown hair was tangled and wet, and her eyes, reddened by tears and storm water, glistened with exhaustion. In her hands she held nothing but a small purse, wallet, and phone. All she had taken when she walked out after witnessing the image now etched in her memory, the man she'd loved for 6 years whispering sweet words to another woman. Elise didn't scream. She didn't cry in front of him. She just walked away, her heels splashing in puddles, her heart pounding as if clenched by a cold hand. She found a stool at the hotel's bar and ordered her third cocktail. "Something stronger, please," she rasped, and the bartender nodded silently. The soft golden light around her did nothing to warm the hollow ache inside her chest. "How could I be so blind?" Elise whispered, eyes fixed on her glass. Each sip burned like regret, but the past clung to her, refusing to let go. A hotel staff member passed nearby, and by chance a room key slipped from his pocket. In her drunken haze, Elise bent down and picked it up. She thought it was hers, or maybe she just didn't care anymore. The card read, "Suite Étoile, the most exclusive suite in the hotel." Elise got up, stumbling toward the elevator. "Just needs sleep. Tomorrow will be different," she told herself. But she had no idea that the door she was about to open would lead her into a fate she could never have imagined. The Suite Étoile at Maison Moreau wasn't like any place Elise had ever stepped into. The door opened to a scene straight from a dream. Gleaming white marble floors beneath crystal chandeliers, deep burgundy leather sofas, a king-sized bed draped in pristine white silk. The air carried a faint scent of oak wood and mint, warm, clean, powerful. But Elise didn't notice any of that. She saw only the bed and felt the exhaustion anchoring her limbs. Kicking off her heels, she let them tumble to the floor and staggered toward the mattress. Everything blurred into alcohol and tears. In the bathroom, Julien Moreau, 34, CEO of Maison Moreau, had just finished a grueling virtual meeting with investors from Tokyo. He loosened his tie, letting the hot water from the shower pound against his tense shoulders. Julien was the definition of control, sharp, composed, unshakably successful. But ever since his ex-wife had left him in the wake of a scandal 3 years ago, he'd stopped believing in anything called love. He stepped out of the bathroom, wearing nothing but a navy robe, and stopped cold. Lying on his bed was a woman he didn't know. Wet hair, flushed cheeks, curled under his silk covers. Julien narrowed his eyes. He didn't speak right away, but before he could say a word, Elise stirred. Drunk and dazed, she looked at him and suddenly lunged forward, wrapping her arms around him like he was the one she'd been desperately waiting for. Why did you leave me?" she cried, her face pressed to his chest, her tears soaking into his robe. Julien froze. Logic screamed to call security, but something in her eyes, so raw, so fractured, held him captive, as if she had just cracked open a wound he hadn't touched in years. This girl wasn't dangerous. She was just broken. "You've got the wrong person," he said, his voice low and cold, but Elise didn't let go. She mumbled a name, probably the man who'd wrecked her heart. Julien exhaled sharply. He gently pried her arms away, catching her as she nearly collapsed. "Fine, I give up," he muttered, half annoyed, half resigned. He pulled the blanket over her and let her sleep on his bed. Then he lay on the cold leather sofa, far from comfort. All night, with the rain tapping against the windows, he couldn't sleep. He just listened to the quiet breathing of a stranger and wondered, who is she, and why can't I look away? Elise woke in an unfamiliar room, the pale light of early morning filtering gently through white curtains. For a few seconds, her mind floated in a haze until she felt the softness beneath her, a large bed wrapped in white silk sheets, so plush it seemed to swallow her whole. The air carried the scent of oak wood and mint, foreign but strangely comforting. Yet as her eyes traced the high ceiling, the crystal chandelier, and the marble floors, reality struck her like a slap. This wasn't her room. A sharp throb pulsed in her head, remnants of the alcohol still weighing down her senses. She sat up abruptly, her heartbeat racing as scattered memories of the night before came flooding back. Rain, cocktails, the soft jazz from the bar, and a man. She glanced around the room, and then she saw him. Julien was sitting on the sofa by the window, dressed in a white shirt and dark trousers, his hair still damp and tousled from the night before. He hadn't been sleeping. He simply sat there, watching the city wake up beyond the glass. When Elise moved, his eyes shifted toward her, cool, unreadable, but not unkind. Embarrassed, Elise clutched the blanket to her chest, her eyes wide with shame. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't know this wasn't my room, she stammered, voice shaking. Julien didn't answer right away. He gave a small nod, his tone calm but tired. You were very drunk. I didn't call security because you weren't dangerous, just sad, he said quietly, like an exhale of truth. Her cheeks flushed crimson. Spotting her bag at the foot of the bed, Elise hurried to gather her things, searching for her room key, but it was gone. Hands trembling, she grabbed a pen and hotel notepad from the bedside table, scrawling a few uneven lines. I'm sorry for the trouble. Thank you for not throwing me out. I won't forget your kindness. She left the note on the table, gave a small bow, and walked briskly out the door, never once looking back. Julien remained seated for a long while. Only after the door closed did he reach for the note she'd left behind. The slanted, hurried handwriting seemed to press into something buried inside him. For 3 years, no one had entered his life without an agenda, and yet this stranger who'd stumbled into his world by mistake left behind something heavier than a presence, a feeling. He didn't smile, but he didn't throw the note away either. Instead, he folded it carefully and tucked it into the inner pocket of his suit. Meanwhile, Elise had returned to her real room on the 10th floor. She washed her face, pulled her hair into a tight bun, and changed into a modest gray dress. Today was her interview at Maison Morel, the career opportunity she had spent 2 years preparing for. She told herself the night before had been an accident, a blur to forget. But fate has a cruel sense of humor, because when Elise walked into the meeting room on the 30th floor, she had no idea that the man seated across the table was Julien Moreau, the same man whose room she had just walked out of that morning. Elise stepped into the interview room, her portfolio clutched tightly in her damp hands, despite having taken several deep breaths to calm herself. Other candidates were already seated, polished, poised, exuding confidence, but none of them made her heart freeze like the man sitting at the head of the table, the one who looked up the moment her name was called. Julien's gaze met hers like a blade slicing through still air. For a heartbeat, the entire room went silent. Elise stood still, spine straight, her fingers gripping her sketches like they were the only anchor to her sanity. His eyes, steely gray, were colder than she remembered, yet at the corners of his mouth something flickered, a twitch, a hint of amusement, as if he'd stumbled upon an intriguing secret. Miss Laurent, Julien said, his tone calm but tinged with mockery, do you often find yourself in the wrong place? A few soft chuckles rippled through the room. Elise swallowed hard, cheeks flushed, but her voice remained steady. Only when I'm overtired, sir, but I never repeat mistakes when it comes to my work. Julien paused, his gaze narrowing slightly. Then, with a curt nod, he said, proceed. Elise opened her portfolio, presenting her concept of blending natural elements into hotel spaces. Reclaimed wood, raw fabrics, and soft natural light to evoke warmth and tranquility. As she spoke, her voice grew firmer. She had rehearsed this for weeks. But every time her eyes flicked toward Julien and met his piercing gaze, her pulse betrayed her. Julien remained silent throughout the entire presentation. No comments, no reactions. Only when Elise finished did he set his pen down and ask, Are you sure you won't lose your way halfway through? Elise met his eyes without flinching. If I make a mistake, I'll fix it. But I'm not lost. I'm carving my own path. For a second, Julian's lips pressed together, maybe to hide a smirk or perhaps in surprise. After the candidates left, the selection panel gathered to discuss. Julian leaned back in his chair, eyes lingering on the name Elise Laurent printed at the top of her file. I want to keep her, he said. Lucas, his assistant, raised an eyebrow. She's got potential, sure, but there are more experienced applicants. You sure? Julian didn't answer right away. He turned his gaze toward the window, where Paris sunlight spilled over the rooftops like liquid gold. I have a feeling. A few days later, Elise received the email. Congratulations, you've been selected as the lead designer for the Suite Étoile renovation. She wasn't sure whether to be thrilled or terrified, because that was the very room where everything had begun, and the man overseeing the project was Julien Moreau. Elise started her new role at Maison Moreau not long after that fateful interview. She had been assigned to lead the renovation of Suite Étoile, the very room where she had awoken in confusion and shame. As if fate hadn't mocked her enough, her direct supervisor on the project was none other than Julien Moreau. From the very first day, Julien was everywhere. Sometimes he showed up with the cool demeanor of a CEO, offering sharp critiques about material choices, lighting angles, or layout structure. Other times he appeared without warning, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, watching her like he was the only one who already knew the ending of a story she was still trying to write. So, are you planning to destroy the entire room? He asked one afternoon, finding her surrounded by taped-up sketches and scattered samples. Elise clenched her jaw, refusing to rise to his bait. It's called creative process, sir, not demolition. Julien had only smirked, that faint, unreadable smile that somehow made her heart beat faster than she cared to admit. She tried to keep her distance. She stayed late, buried herself in blueprints and mood boards, focused on minute details, anything to avoid catching his gaze. That look of his, cool and curious, made her feel both exposed and challenged. One morning, when she arrived at her desk earlier than usual, she found a vanilla latte waiting neatly beside her sketchpad. Tucked underneath was a small handwritten note, vanilla latte. Don't overwork yourself. No name. But the lingering scent of mint on the cup said more than any signature ever could. Elise didn't know how to react. She smiled faintly, torn between warmth and confusion. She'd thought Julien was made of ice, but clearly, something softer lived beneath the surface. A few days later, when the office was nearly empty, Elise stayed behind to work late again. The design floor on level 28 was silent, bathed in the yellow glow of desk lamps. She sat slumped over her table, surrounded by messy drafts, pencil smudges on her fingertips. Her head rested against her arm. Exhaustion had finally caught up with her. Julien passed by the hallway, a file folder in hand. He noticed the light. Curious, he stepped inside. There she was, fast asleep at her desk, hair falling gently across her cheek, breathing softly like a child lost in dreams. He paused, watching her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he slipped off his suit jacket and carefully draped it over her shoulders. The dim light turned the moment fragile, almost sacred. Julien didn't speak. He stood there, quietly watching her sleep, peaceful, fragile. Then he walked away, leaving behind a girl who had unknowingly stirred the part of him he thought had died long ago. The site visit to the outskirts of Provence was meant to inspire the design team for Maison Moreau's upcoming resort collection. Elise joined as the lead designer, but no one expected Julien to attend personally, a decision that immediately shifted the atmosphere. Spring weather, unreliable as always, betrayed them. What began as cloudy skies quickly turned to pouring rain. After an afternoon surveying old wooden cabins near the pine forest, the road back was blocked by a fallen tree. The team was forced to seek shelter in one of the cabins, a modest structure, warm but far from luxurious. Julien and Elise stayed in the main room under the guise of spatial assessment, a quiet living area with a worn sofa and a crackling fireplace. The lights were dim, the sound of rain tapping steadily against the roof tiles. Elise sat close to the fire, hugging a pillow, trying to appear unfazed by the nearness of him. Julien sat across, sleeves rolled, his eyes locked on the flames. "Have you ever been betrayed?" she asked softly, as if unsure whether she wanted an answer. He didn't respond right away. It had been a long time since anyone had asked him something so personal. "Yes," he finally said, voice low, rough, "and I should have seen it coming." Elise nodded slowly, staring into the fire. "I loved someone for 6 years. Gave him everything, my dreams, my time, and still, I wasn't enough to keep him from lying." Julien was silent for a moment, then his voice dropped, deeper, heavier. 3 years ago, my wife left, not just left. She emptied our accounts, disappeared, and the media feasted on it for months. I didn't just lose her, I lost my faith in people. Elise looked at him. In the flickering firelight, he wasn't a CEO anymore. He was a man who'd been betrayed down to the bone. The silence that followed was thick, almost unbearable. Neither of them looked at the other, but the air between them changed. Warmer, heavier. Shared pain became a silent language. Julien stood and stepped closer. Elise lifted her eyes to him. Their gazes met, no words needed. He leaned down, slow and careful, and kissed her. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't planned, it was real. That kiss carried apologies, truths, and the fragile hope of something new. Elise didn't pull away. She kissed him back, her hands gripping his shirt as if to hold something from slipping away again. But then Julien stepped back, his eyes, moments ago open, clouded again with fear. "We shouldn't," he whispered, barely above a breath, and turned away. The next morning, the sky had cleared. The team headed back to Paris. Julien sat in the front, quiet the entire ride. Elise watched the trees blur past through the window, her heart sinking. She had thought it was a beginning, but to Julien, someone who had once been left behind, it was perhaps just a moment he couldn't let himself believe in again. 3 days later, an email arrived. "You have been reassigned to our Marseille office, effective immediately." No explanation, no farewell. Elise didn't ask why. She didn't protest. She simply packed up her sketches, walked out of the office, and left behind a kiss that never had the chance to become something more. Elise was in Marseille, working at a quieter branch, trying to forget. Trying and failing. Because every morning she stepped into the office, she saw that room in her mind. Every vanilla latte carried the memory of mint, and every time she remembered that kiss in the stone chateau, it wasn't the goodbye that hurt, it was the silence. Elise didn't return to Paris by accident. She came back because someone finally gave her the truth she'd quietly longed for, but never dared ask. It happened on a late afternoon in the Marseille office. Lucas, Julien's assistant, stopped by during a short business trip. After a routine exchange, he stood to leave, then hesitated. "Elise," he said softly, "I think you deserve to know. Julien didn't send you away because you failed. He sent you away because he was afraid." Elise froze, her eyes fixed on his. Lucas sighed, hesitating for just a second before continuing. 3 years ago, his ex-wife betrayed him. She didn't just leave. She exploited his trust, disappeared when the company was on the brink of collapse, and left him in the eye of a media storm. Julien didn't chase after her, but he's lived with the fear ever since that anyone close to him will get pulled into that chaos. He thought that if he pushed you away early enough, maybe you wouldn't get hurt. Those words didn't wound Elise. They opened her eyes. Julien hadn't abandoned her. He'd tried, clumsily, to protect her, and she had let him, because she had been afraid too. That night, Elise boarded the first train back to Paris. As Julien prepared to step onto the stage to unveil the redesigned Suite Étoile, the doors to the Grand Hall opened. Elise walked in, gaze steady, heart no longer hiding. Without an introduction, she stepped forward, took the microphone, and looked straight at him. "My name is Elise Laurent," she said, her voice steady. "I designed this room. Then I was sent away, maybe because I made mistakes, or maybe Because I walked too far into someone's life when I only meant to pass by. She paused, her gaze searching for Julian's. But sometimes, the wrong step takes you to the right person. Julien walked onto the stage. He didn't speak at first. He simply reached out his hand. Elise placed hers into his, her smile trembling. Julien leaned in, voice barely a whisper. I was wrong to let fear choose for me. Elise met his gaze, eyes glistening. Then, let courage choose this time. I'm here because I choose you. Applause broke out, flashbulbs lit the air. And this time neither of them turned away.